It was a Friday. Our wedding was scheduled for noon, and the $75 million bridge loan from Grant Capital to Caldwell Hospitality Group was due to close at 4 that afternoon. At 11:58, just as the minister asked Nathan Caldwell whether he took me to be his wife, his phone rang. It wasn't his normal ringtone. It was a soft piano melody. For the past 10 years, whenever that music played, whether we were at dinner, on vacation, or attending an important event, Nathan had immediately reached for his phone. It was Chloe Bennett's personal ringtone, his college sweetheart. More than 200 guests filled the seaside chapel in Newport. My parents were there, along with members of Caldwell Hospitality's board, senior executives from the lead bank who had known both families for years, and a society reporter invited to cover the high-profile wedding. They all watched Nathan pull out his phone at the altar. "Sorry," he murmured to the minister before answering. He didn't even lower the volume. "Chloe? What's wrong?" A woman's trembling voice came through the speaker. "Nathan, my stomach hurts." His shoulders had been tense throughout the ceremony. The moment he heard her voice, they loosened. Not because he felt relieved, because he had suddenly found something more important to focus on than marrying me. "Where are you?" "At my apartment. I'm afraid to move." "Did you call your doctor?" "I don't want to go to the hospital." She paused. "I just want you." I was standing close enough to hear every word. "Tell her to call emergency services," I said. Nathan covered the phone with one hand and frowned at me. "Amelia, don't start this now." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. "This is our wedding." "She's sick." "And what are you planning to do?" Instead of answering me, he spoke into the phone. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." A low murmur spread through the chapel. I caught his sleeve. "Nathan, you can't leave. She needs me. She lives less than 10 minutes from a hospital. She has a private physician and an assistant. Why does she need you?" His expression hardened. "Do you have to do this in front of everyone? You're the one walking out in front of everyone." Chloe's voice came through the phone again, softer this time. "Forget it. Stay there. I don't want Amelia to feel humiliated because of me." Nathan's arm went rigid beneath my fingers. "Did you hear that? She's in pain and she's still thinking about you." I stared at him. "If she were thinking about me, she wouldn't have called during your vows." "That's enough. This isn't the first time. My birthday, the night of my award ceremony, the day I was in the hospital, every time she calls, you always." The slap cut off the rest of the sentence. My head snapped to the side. First came a sharp ringing in my ears. Then every other sound seemed to disappear. I tasted blood. Someone in the front row screamed. My mother shot to her feet. My father reached us first and shoved Nathan away from me. "Stay away from her." Nathan looked down at his right hand. For one brief moment, he seemed shocked by what he had done. Then he lifted his head. She wouldn't stop attacking Chloe. I slowly turned back toward him. "So this was my fault." "I didn't say that." "You just did." His mouth opened, but before he could answer, Chloe started crying on the phone again. Nathan took a breath and straightened the cuff of his tuxedo. "We'll talk when you've calmed down." Then he stepped off the platform and walked down the aisle scattered with white rose petals. The chapel doors opened, flooding the room with coastal sunlight. Nathan never looked back. The enormous screen behind the altar was still playing our pre-recorded engagement video. On screen, Nathan sat beside me and looked directly into the camera. "Amelia will always be my first priority, no matter what happens." A staff member rushed to turn it off. Silence swallowed the chapel. My mother came to me and wrapped her shawl around my bare shoulders. "We're leaving." She didn't ask me to follow him. She didn't tell me to preserve appearances. My father stood nearby, his face dark with fury. The estate manager and head of security arrived within minutes. "Ms. Grant, we've preserved the chapel footage," the security chief said quietly. "Would you like us to call the police?" I looked at the closed chapel doors. After several seconds, I nodded. "Yes. Call them." The police arrived 20 minutes later. They secured the video, took down the names of several witnesses, and photographed the marks on my face. One of the officers asked whether I was ready to give a complete formal statement. At that moment, I couldn't even undo the buttons running down the back of my wedding gown. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I agreed to let them document my injuries and told them I would provide a full statement with my attorney present. It wasn't because I wanted to forgive Nathan. I simply didn't have the strength to decide, in that moment, whether I wanted to spend the next several years repeating the story of that wedding to police officers, attorneys, and strangers in a courtroom. I took the microphone from the minister. "I'm sorry for wasting everyone's time." Every face turned toward me. "The wedding is canceled." Nathan's mother, Evelyn Caldwell, rose immediately. She gathered the skirt of her gown and hurried up the steps. "Amelia, don't make a decision yet. Nathan will be back. He doesn't need to come back." This was a terrible argument, nothing more. My father stepped between us. "Your son just struck my daughter." "George, of course I know what he did was wrong." Evelyn lowered her voice. "But the bank's representatives are here. Grant Capital's loan is supposed to close at 4. We cannot let a private dispute destroy a transaction our companies have spent 6 months preparing." At last, she said what truly frightened her. Not my face. The money. I wasn't only the daughter of Grant Capital's founder. I was also the managing director of the firm's hospitality and real estate investment division. I had worked at Grant Capital for 8 years and had participated in more than a dozen hotel acquisitions and restructurings. I had studied architectural preservation before earning an MBA and joining my family's company, where I focused on hotel investments and historic properties. My team had led the Caldwell loan from the first meeting through final due diligence. The $75 million bridge loan was supposed to keep Caldwell Hospitality alive long enough to restructure its debt. If the funds reached escrow by 4, the lead bank would give the company another 6 months. If the money didn't arrive, the bank could freeze Caldwell's remaining credit line. But the funds belonged to Grant Capital's investors. No matter what had just happened to me, I couldn't stand in a chapel and cancel a corporate transaction out of anger. I turned toward my father's longtime legal advisor, Daniel Reed. "Call the investment committee and outside counsel." Evelyn visibly relaxed. She thought I was giving in. I continued. "Until we confirm that Caldwell's management still satisfies the conditions of the loan, put today's closing on hold." Her expression froze. "You can't make that decision alone." "I know." I handed the microphone to a member of the staff. "That's why I'm asking the committee to vote." Back in the bridal suite, my mother and the makeup artist helped me out of my wedding gown. My fingers refused to cooperate. They had undone only half the buttons when my phone started vibrating across the table. Nathan called 3 times. The 4th call came from Evelyn. I answered neither of them. Even after the screen went dark, I kept staring at Nathan's name. For 10 years, whenever something went wrong, my first instinct had been to call him. That afternoon, I opened our message thread, typed several words, and deleted them one by one. In the room next door, Grant Capital's investment committee was holding an emergency conference call. Daniel came in a few minutes later. "You can't participate in the first vote." "Why not?" "Because you're directly involved in what happened today. I brought this transaction to the firm." "That's exactly why the process has to be clean." He set a folder on the table. "If the closing is suspended, Caldwell may later claim you used company funds to retaliate against your fiancé. You need to recuse yourself." I looked up at him. "Do you think I'm retaliating?" "I think you're furious." Daniel's voice remained calm. "And you have every right to be. But justified anger cannot replace corporate procedure." My father stood in the doorway and didn't contradict him. "Listen to Daniel." I looked at my father. 6 months ago, the risk team warned us that Caldwell's cash flow was too tight, he said. They also requested additional reviews of several vendors. "I know. You were the one who said the remaining issues were minor and asked the team to move faster." I tightened my grip on the ice pack. "Are you saying this is my fault?" "Of course not." My father sat across from me. "Nathan chose to strike you. Whoever forged the financing documents is responsible for that crime. But you did allow your trust in him to affect your judgment on this deal." I had no answer. Caldwell Hospitality had been required to complete a more thorough vendor review before closing. Nathan had told me the missing information was nothing more than delayed filing. I had believed him. I had even told the committee that Caldwell's management could be trusted. Until that day, I had believed love had only weakened my judgment in my personal life. Now I understood that I had allowed it into my professional decisions as well. More than 20 minutes later, Daniel returned. The committee voted 4-1 to place the closing on hold for 6 business days. On what grounds? Material concerns involving the chief executive's conduct, management representations, related party vendors, and the intended use of funds. What will the bank do? They won't declare Caldwell in default yet, but they've frozen all new draws while the review is pending. 6 business days. Within that time, we needed a legitimate commercial basis to either resume the loan or terminate it. Otherwise, Grant Capital could face litigation. Daniel placed a document in front of me. The review has already uncovered the first problem. The heading read, Irrevocable Funding Confirmation. According to the letter, Grant Capital had satisfied all internal approval requirements and would transfer $75 million into escrow by 4 that afternoon. My electronic signature appeared at the bottom. I had never signed it. This isn't our format.
No.
Who sent it to the bank? Caldwell's chief financial officer's office. Whoever created it had access to the real transaction number, the escrow details, and the names of the outside attorneys involved. They had also registered an email domain that looked almost identical to Grant Capital's. The bank hadn't treated the message as proof that the money had arrived. It had only relied on the document long enough to delay freezing Caldwell's credit line until 4. Before releasing any funds, the bank would still have called Grant Capital directly. If the wedding had gone ahead and we had closed on schedule, the forged document might have been filed away as a duplicate and never seriously examined. Did Nathan know? My mother asked. I stared at the signature. In the past, I would have answered immediately. Nathan would never do something like that. Now, all I could say was, I don't know. Nathan returned to the estate at 4:08. Security stopped him outside the main building. Daniel entered the bridal suite and asked whether I was willing to see him. 10 minutes, I said. Keep security outside. The meeting took place in the estate office. Daniel sat to one side of the room, and 2 security officers remained beyond the door. When Nathan entered, he didn't ask about my injury. He didn't ask whether the guests had left. You stopped the closing? I had changed into white trousers and a blouse. The mark on my face was still visible despite the ice. Nathan's gaze rested on it for less than a second. The bank froze our borrowing access, he said. We have supplier payments tomorrow. Payroll is coming up. I said nothing. Amelia, I know you're angry. The committee put the closing on hold. You proposed it. Yes. Because I left the wedding? Because you left the wedding and hit me.
His jaw tightened.
I lost control. Is that an apology? Several seconds passed. I'm sorry. The words came quickly, like a minor concession in a negotiation. Now can you release the funds? I looked at him. How is Chloe? She took some medication. She didn't go to a hospital? She hates hospitals. So you left our wedding to bring her medicine? Nathan slid his hands into his pockets and paced twice across the room. She called me about something else. What? Her company is having financial problems. Aurora Wellness? He glanced at me. Yes. Chloe had founded Aurora Wellness 3 years earlier. The company provided wellness programs, employee mental health services, and health-focused dining plans for luxury hotels. Among Caldwell's dozens of vendors, it had never appeared especially important. Why did she need to discuss business during our wedding? She was emotionally unstable. So the stomach pain was a lie? She may genuinely have felt sick. Irritation crept into Nathan's voice. You've already decided she's a terrible person. Nothing I say will matter. I didn't argue. Did you know someone sent the bank a funding confirmation this morning? His movement paused. Only briefly. What confirmation? One carrying my electronic signature. Maybe the finance team prepared something to buy time with the bank. They also registered a fake Grant Capital email domain. Nathan fell silent. Did you instruct them to prepare a letter? I asked. I told the team to make sure the bank didn't freeze our line before closing. Did you authorize the use of my signature? No. When did you learn the letter had been sent? I didn't know. Daniel spoke from across the room. Mr. Caldwell, all further answers will be documented. Nathan turned toward him. This is between Amelia and me. We are no longer engaged, I said. For the first time, he seemed to understand what canceling the wedding actually meant. You're ending 10 years over one day? I pointed to my face. It wasn't one day. Today was simply the day I stopped pretending I couldn't see it. Nathan's breathing grew heavier. He stood. Give me 24 hours. To do what? I'll make the finance team turn over everything. I'll find out what happened with that letter. The review will be handled independently, Daniel said. Caldwell must preserve its servers, emails, and phone records. Any deletions will be documented. Nathan stared at him. You're already treating me like a criminal. We're treating you as the chief executive on the other side of a $75 million transaction. When the meeting ended, security escorted Nathan off the estate. A message from him appeared on my phone minutes later. Don't let your father and his lawyers turn this into something it isn't. We need to talk before they destroy everything. I turned the phone face down. The ice in my pack had melted into water. Grant Capital began its special review on Monday morning. Because the loan had reached the closing stage, we already had read-only access to Caldwell's virtual data room. The audit team reopened every contract and payment connected to Aurora Wellness. Over the previous 18 months, the company had received nearly $10 million from Caldwell Hospitality. Some of the services were real. During its first year, Chloe had designed wellness programs for 3 resorts and helped establish an employee counseling hotline. The problems began later. More than $4 million in payments had no complete evidence of services. One hotel that had already closed was still being charged for employee health assessments. More troubling, Aurora Wellness's original investor appeared on paper to be an ordinary holding company. When the audit team traced the beneficial ownership through several layers, they discovered that the holding company was owned by a family trust controlled by Evelyn Caldwell. Caldwell had never disclosed that connection during the loan review. If this was an oversight, they'll need to explain it, the head of the audit team said. If management concealed the relationship deliberately, the conditions of the loan were not satisfied. Caldwell's chief financial officer had gone on medical leave the night of the wedding. His attorney informed us that he would not participate in informal questioning. My father wanted the documents sent immediately to the lead lender's fraud risk unit. I hesitated. Give Caldwell 1 day to respond formally. My father studied me. Why? They may argue the ownership interest was too small to be material. We need their full explanation in writing. You're still hoping this was a disclosure failure. I want the firm to follow procedure. Those two things can both be true. The room fell quiet. My father didn't press further, but his words remained with me. I did hope it was disorganization rather than fraud. If Nathan had known about the forged letter, and if the $4 million resulted from terrible accounting rather than deliberate deception, then perhaps the previous 10 years had not been one long lie. That afternoon, Caldwell's attorneys responded. They argued that the investment in Aurora Wellness was too small to qualify as a material related party interest and insisted that every service had been provided. They included no complete delivery records. The same day, a financial news site published an article. Grant Capital executive freezes Fiancé's company funds after wedding dispute. The story didn't mention the slap. It quoted an anonymous source who claimed I had used my family's wealth for years to interfere in Caldwell's business. The video circulating online had also been edited. It began with me confronting Nathan about Chloe and ended with him leaving the chapel. The moment he struck me had been removed. Commenters accused me of risking 2,000 jobs because I was jealous of an old girlfriend. Others said a spoiled heiress had finally discovered that money couldn't force a man to obey her. That evening, 2 Grant Capital investors requested a formal briefing. I submitted a written recusal to the investment committee. From that moment forward, I could provide evidence and answer questions, but I could no longer participate in any vote concerning the Caldwell loan. The document was only 1 page long. My hand shook less than it had when I canceled the wedding. Signing it hurt more. On Tuesday morning, Nathan's sister, Olivia, contacted Daniel. The meeting took place at a law firm in Manhattan. Olivia had served as Caldwell Hospitality's vice president of finance before resigning suddenly 7 months earlier. Evelyn had told everyone that her daughter needed time away because of anxiety. When I asked Nathan about it, he said Olivia couldn't handle the pressure. The woman sitting across from me looked much thinner than I remembered. She wore an oversized gray coat and never touched the glass of water in front of her. Her attorney spoke first. Olivia is willing to provide internal emails, but all materials must be delivered simultaneously to the lead lender's fraud risk unit and independent investigative counsel. Grant Capital cannot retain them alone. Agreed, Daniel said.
Olivia looked at me.
I'm sorry about the wedding. You didn't make the call and you didn't hit me. But I knew Chloe was still in Nathan's life. I didn't tell her it didn't matter. It did. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed Nathan to support a financial remediation plan. Her voice was quiet. He promised that once the loan closed, he would deal with Aurora Wellness. You believed him? A tired smile crossed her face. I wanted to. She handed over more than 20 internal emails. Late the previous year, Olivia had discovered that Aurora Wellness lacked supporting records for several major invoices. She ordered the payments suspended. Evelyn responded, "This is a strategic vendor approved by the chair's office. No further review is required." Olivia continued refusing to sign. 3 days later, Nathan emailed her directly. Process the payments as mother instructed. Once the grant funds arrive, we'll reclassify the expenses as part of the broader restructuring. Reclassify them as what? I asked. Pre-acquisition and renovation expenses for the hotel portfolio. Was that legal? If the underlying services had actually been performed. Olivia looked down at the table. Some of them weren't. When she refused to sign the quarterly financial certification, Evelyn ordered her to take leave. Her corporate email and financial access were revoked. Family staff were instructed to report whether she contacted directors or journalists. Evelyn also arranged for a physician who had worked with the family for years to tell the board that Olivia was temporarily unfit for a high-pressure role. You could have hired your own lawyer, I said. I eventually did. Olivia glanced at the attorney beside her. But at first, I kept telling myself it was a family problem. I thought if Nathan stood up to her, my mother would stop. What did he do? He said the company was in the most dangerous period of its history and asked me not to make things worse. Daniel asked about the forged funding confirmation. Olivia opened her laptop. An email sent the day before the wedding appeared on the screen. It came from Nathan's personal assistant and was addressed to the chief financial officer. Nathan wants written confirmation today that will be sufficient to keep the bank line open. Do not wait for Grant's attorneys. The message didn't mention forging my signature. It didn't explicitly order anyone to register a false domain. It proved only that Nathan had instructed his finance team to bypass our lawyers. Why did you keep these emails? Daniel asked. Before I resigned, I suspected they might be deleted. I automatically forwarded anything involving my signature or certification responsibility to my attorney. The original timestamps and digital signatures had been preserved. As the meeting ended, Olivia called my name. Nathan wasn't always like this. Then she quickly added, I'm not defending him. Before our father died, he worked harder than anyone. And he really did love you. I looked at her. I know, that was the most difficult part. If Nathan had been a liar from the beginning, everything would have been simpler. He hadn't been. He had simply chosen the easier option over the right one, again and again, until there was no way back. On Tuesday night, Chloe released a video. She sat in a room designed to resemble a private medical lounge. A clinic wristband circled her arm, and a cropped ultrasound image lay on the table beside her. Nathan sat next to her. Chloe looked directly into the camera, her eyes red. I never intended to discuss my private life publicly. But over the past few days, people have accused me of deliberately destroying the wedding. She placed a hand over her abdomen. I experienced severe pain that day because I was 10 weeks pregnant. She said Nathan was the father. Nathan then admitted that his behavior at the wedding had been out of control. He apologized for hurting me without mentioning that he had struck me. When I believed my child might be in danger, I couldn't remain at the ceremony. He continued. I hope Grant Capital will not allow a private dispute to harm Caldwell Hospitality's employees. The video spread within hours. Public discussion shifted away from forged documents. Now people were asking whether I was using company money to punish a man who was about to become a father. Grant Capital's website was flooded with complaints. At the investor briefing, one partner asked me directly, if the wedding had gone forward, would you still have supported the loan? Yes. Even though the related party vendor issue already existed? I paused. At the time, I didn't believe it was serious enough to prevent closing. And now I acknowledge that I underestimated the management risk. No one spoke. The wedding forced the firm to re-examine the transaction. I continued, but the loan was placed on hold because of forged financing documents and an undisclosed related party vendor. What if Nathan had nothing to do with a confirmation letter? The committee will decide based on the evidence. It was the only professionally responsible answer, but saying it felt like cutting away another piece of the life I had spent 10 years building. After the meeting, my mother spoke quietly in the car. At the wedding, there was a moment when I almost told you to finish the ceremony. I turned toward her.
Why?
Because everyone was there. She looked down at her hands. I had spent 7 months planning it. Our friends, our business partners, the reporter, everyone was watching. For a moment, I thought we should preserve appearances and deal with the problem afterward. But you didn't say it. Because he hit you. She raised her eyes. But before that happened, I nearly put appearances ahead of your feelings. My father had loosened investment standards because of me. My mother had almost asked me to preserve the family's image. I had repeatedly explained Nathan's behavior by telling myself he cared too deeply about people from his past. None of us wanted to admit that we were helping the problem continue. Not until it became impossible to ignore. On Friday morning, as the closing standstill entered its final stage, Chloe contacted Grant Capital's outside counsel. She didn't ask to speak with me. She told the attorneys that Nathan wanted her to sign a statement. The statement said she had created Aurora Wellness's contracts, invoices, and service records independently. Caldwell's management, it claimed, had never participated. Nathan was preparing to make her responsible for everything. Chloe offered evidence in exchange for immunity. The attorneys informed her that private counsel could not promise immunity from prosecution. She could provide the material to the bank's fraud risk unit and the appropriate investigative authorities, and her own lawyer could negotiate from there. The following Monday, she agreed to a formal interview. I wasn't present during the first half. Only when the investigative attorney needed to establish what had happened on the wedding day was I allowed into the room. Chloe wore a dark coat. There was no trace of the pale makeup from the video. The moment she saw me, she said, "I'm not pregnant." I pulled out a chair and sat down. Whose ultrasound was it? My assistant sister's. When did Nathan find out? At the hotel after the wedding. 6 weeks before the ceremony, Chloe had told Nathan she was pregnant. At first, he promised to deal with our relationship before the wedding. Later, he asked her to remain silent. Caldwell needed the loan first. He told me he would discuss divorce with you after the money came in, Chloe said. You believed him? She didn't answer. Aurora Wellness had operated legitimate programs during its first year. After Caldwell's expansion began failing, Evelyn started asking Chloe to submit invoices for services that had never occurred. In return, Chloe was allowed to keep part of the management fees. You knew the invoices were false, I said. Yes. Why did you continue? The company was already in debt.
She paused.
And I didn't want to lose Nathan. The day before the wedding, Chloe discovered that Nathan's lawyers were preparing a statement that would shift all responsibility for the vendor scheme onto her. So she called during the ceremony. The stomach pain was a lie. She told Nathan that if he didn't come, she would send the emails and financial records to the bank. You told him at the hotel that you weren't pregnant? Yes. Then why did he agree to release the video with you? Because I suggested that we keep the pregnancy story alive. Chloe looked down at the table. If the public believed he had left the wedding to protect his child, Grant Capital would come under pressure. And he agreed? Yes. She took an old phone from her bag. The recording contained footsteps and the low hum of an air conditioner. Much of the conversation was difficult to hear. Then Nathan's voice came through. Don't change the pregnancy story yet. If the public believes I had a reason to leave, Grant won't be able to keep the money frozen. Chloe asked, what about the letter to the bank? Nathan answered, the bank only needed to see a signature long enough to get us past 4. The digital forensics team took possession of the phone. The recording still had to be authenticated, but it directly connected Nathan to the false financing document. After the interview, Chloe stopped me. I didn't give them the evidence to help you. I know. I did it for myself. That was your right. She studied my face. Do you think I'm pathetic? I think you participated in fraud. You were fooled by him for 10 years. Yes. I didn't defend myself. The attack she had prepared seemed to lose its target. After a moment, she said, I always thought that if he chose me in the end, it would prove I hadn't lost to you. Nathan never truly chose between us. I looked at her. He chose whoever was most useful to him at the time.
We didn't shake hands.
Chloe didn't apologize. She had surrendered the evidence because Nathan was preparing to sacrifice her first. That was enough to move the investigation forward. It was not enough to make her innocent. On the final business day of the standstill, the lead lender's fraud risk unit opened a formal investigation. Grant Capital's investment committee voted unanimously not to resume the original loan. I did not participate. That evening, Nathan requested a meeting through his attorney. It took place in a conference room at Grant Capital's outside law firm. Daniel, Nathan's attorney, and a security officer were present. Nathan entered with his collar open and exhaustion beneath his eyes. You have Chloe's recording. Daniel sat at the opposite end of the room. We're here to discuss facts. Nathan ignored him. I admit there was a problem with the confirmation letter. Who ordered it? I asked. I told the finance team to prepare something that would buy us more time with the bank. Did you tell them to use my signature? Not directly. When did you learn they had? After it was submitted. Why didn't you withdraw it? Nathan gripped the back of a chair. Because if the bank froze our line, we might not have been able to make payroll the following week. You could have told the bank the truth and let Caldwell default that day. You could have told me. He looked up. Would you have allowed the loan to close? I didn't answer immediately. If Nathan had come to me a week before the wedding and admitted that Caldwell had issued false vendor payments, what would I have done? I might still have helped him find a lawful restructuring plan, because at that point, I still loved him. You never gave me the choice, I said. Nathan sank into the chair as though his strength had disappeared. He stared down at his hands. I know what I did. I just kept telling myself that if I could survive one more week, I could repair everything. Then he told me how Caldwell's crisis had begun. When his father died, the company was already heavily leveraged. Aurora Wellness had initially provided real services. Later, renovations at 2 hotels ran over budget, and the bank refused to increase Caldwell's credit line. Evelyn suggested temporarily routing some of the costs through vendor contracts, with the intention of correcting the accounts once the hotels became profitable. Nathan agreed, but the hotels never produced the expected revenue. Every old problem required new money to conceal it. The $75 million loan had been designed to support a restructuring. Over time, it became the only way to cover the holes they had already created. I needed that money, Nathan finally admitted. Then why were you still marrying me? Because I loved you. He paused. At least in the beginning, I didn't connect you to the loan. And later, the company kept getting worse. His voice dropped. I stopped knowing whether I was preparing for our wedding or waiting for Grant Capital's money. And Chloe? I had feelings for her. He leaned back and closed his eyes. When I was with her, I remembered who I was before I inherited the company. I didn't have to calculate debt every day or prove I deserved the Caldwell name. So, you kept her in your life while preparing to marry me. I thought I could control it. He had believed he could control everything. My trust. Chloe's dependence. His mother's power. The bank's patience. Everyone could wait. Once the company was saved, he would deal with the people he had hurt. Restore the loan, he said. My mother and I can both leave management. Put an independent team in control of the money. The original transaction is over. What happens to the company? The bank and the independent directors will discuss another structure. Grant Capital can save it. That decision is no longer mine. Nathan looked up sharply. You recused yourself? Yes.
Why?
Because my judgment on this investment had been affected by our relationship. So, you're going to stand back and let the company collapse? There may be a new operating loan. Then say something in our favor. His hand moved toward me before he pulled it back. Amelia, we had 10 years. I remember. You can really watch me lose everything? I gave you many chances. You simply mistook my forgiveness for permission. Daniel indicated that the meeting was over. Nathan reached the door and stopped. This time, he didn't mention the loan. He looked back at me. I'm sorry. There was no explanation. No request attached to it. I watched him leave. I didn't say I forgave him. The Caldwell family remained the company's largest shareholder, but it did not control the board. Independent directors held a majority of the 9 seats. Under the corporate bylaws, executives suspected of material fraud could be suspended while an investigation was underway. When Caldwell's emergency board meeting began, I wasn't in the room. Grant Capital had already terminated the original loan and sent only an observer to discuss a possible replacement structure. The digital forensics report confirmed that the false funding letter had been created in the chief financial officer's office. Nathan's personal assistant had instructed an outside technology consultant to register the fake email domain. Chloe's recording showed no evidence of editing. Nathan admitted knowing that the document carried my signature, but he maintained that he had never explicitly ordered anyone to forge it. Evelyn shifted all operational responsibility to her son. He was the chief executive, she said. Every payment carried his approval. Nathan stared at her. You brought Aurora Wellness into the company. I was an early investor. What about the offshore accounts? Legitimate trust arrangements. You told me those transfers were temporary. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. You're 35 years old, Nathan. Stop pretending every document you signed was forced on you by your mother. Olivia sat beside the investigative attorneys. Nathan looked at her. Do you think all of this was my fault too?
Not all of it, she said.
But the part that belongs to you cannot keep being carried by someone else. The meeting lasted 6 hours. No one stood up and declared victory. What mattered were payroll, hotel operations, and bank debt. In the end, the board voted to suspend Nathan as chief executive. Evelyn was stripped of her authority as chair. An independent restructuring team took control of the company's finances. Removing them did not solve the cash crisis. Grant Capital later submitted a new proposal. Instead of $75 million, it offered a $30 million supervised operating loan. The money would be released in stages into a controlled account and could be used only for payroll, essential suppliers, and hotel operations. The conditions were strict. The former management team had to step down. The company had to undergo a full independent audit. Long-term loss-making assets had to be sold. All related party payments had to stop. The bank and independent directors would supervise every release of funds. Before the committee discussed the proposal, my father asked for my opinion. Protect the hotels that can still operate, I said. Don't allow the former management team near the money. You still can't vote. I know. The proposal was approved without my participation. That mattered. If I had decided the outcome myself, people would always wonder whether it had been an investment judgment or my final punishment for Nathan. 3 months later, Caldwell Hospitality completed the first stage of its restructuring. 2 consistently and profitable hotels were sold. The corporate office eliminated several positions. Most frontline employees kept their jobs. More than 200 people still lost theirs. There was no way to move through a financial crisis without innocent people being hurt. Grant Capital underwent its own internal review. The Independent Compliance Committee concluded that I had placed too much trust in Nathan's representations during the earlier stages of due diligence. For 1 year, I was barred from participating in investments involving family-controlled companies and related party transactions. Every other project under my supervision was subjected to an additional level of review. The restriction cost me a promotion I had expected to receive. My father asked whether I thought the punishment was excessive.
No.
You didn't participate in the fraud. But I ignored the risk team's warnings. That isn't the same as committing a crime. Of course it isn't. I looked at him. But it was still my mistake. Chloe admitted to participating in false vendor contracts, concealing the related party relationship from the loan review team, and helping Nathan maintain a false public narrative after the investigation began. The fake pregnancy was not a separate criminal charge. It was used as evidence that she had participated in a coordinated effort to pressure the lender and influence public opinion. Aurora Wellness shut down. Its remaining assets were used to repay part of the money. Through her attorney, Chloe sent me one final message. I always believed that if Nathan chose me in the end, it would prove I hadn't lost. I didn't respond. Evelyn refused to plead guilty. Investigators discovered that she had collected consulting fees from related entities and transferred some of the money into family trusts. She continued insisting that everything she had done was necessary to protect the company her husband had left behind. Her case entered a long legal battle. Olivia returned to Caldwell as a financial advisor to the restructuring committee. She was not made chief executive simply because she had exposed her family. The board required her to prove that she could lead without relying on the Caldwell name. She accepted that. We always believed this company had to be run by a Caldwell, she told me. Now, at least someone is asking whether it belongs to one family name or to everyone whose life depends on it. 1 year later, I saw Nathan again outside the victim witness waiting area in federal court. It was the day of his plea hearing. The prosecutor's office had asked me to confirm the losses associated with the theft of my electronic signature and review the restitution documents. Nathan wore an ordinary navy coat. He had lost weight. Our attorneys remained at the other end of the corridor and gave us several minutes. Nathan spoke first. Did your face scar? No. I've wanted to ask. You had plenty of opportunities. He lowered his head. I know. The corridor was quiet. After a while, he asked, how is the company? More stable than it was last year. Olivia says it might become profitable again next year. Maybe. Do you still hate me? I looked toward the window. During the first few months, I had hated him. Whenever I wondered whether I had been too harsh, I remembered his hand striking my face in the chapel. Eventually, even that anger faded. I don't need to hate you to keep moving forward anymore. Nathan's eyes reddened. I really did want to marry you. I believe you. He looked surprised. You do. Those years couldn't all have been false. We had eaten takeout together in cheap apartments. He had stayed awake all night when I had a fever. After his father died, he had cried in my arms like a frightened child. Those moments had been real. The betrayal, deception, and violence that followed had also been real. Acknowledging that he had once loved me did not mean I had to accept everything he later became. If I had told you the truth before the wedding, he asked, would you have helped me? Maybe. Then would we have avoided all of this? The company wasn't our only problem. Chloe. Not only Chloe. I looked at him. You always believed that if the reason was important enough, the harm could wait. The company could come first. The loan could come first. Chloe could be dealt with later. I could be dealt with later. But the people you hurt were expected to wait forever. A court employee called my name. I turned toward the waiting area. Behind me, Nathan said, I'm sorry. No explanation. No request. I paused. I heard you. Then I walked through the door. 2 years after the canceled wedding, I returned to the Newport estate. This time, I was leading a historic preservation project. After leaving Grant Capital's financing division, I had returned to the work I had loved before earning my MBA. When I graduated, a preservation firm in London had offered me a position. I turned it down to remain in New York with Nathan. At the time, I believed love always required someone to sacrifice. Later, I learned that a relationship might demand compromise, but it should never require one person to keep abandoning herself. The white roses were gone from the chapel. Summer hydrangeas lined the steps. My mother walked inside with me. It looks smaller than I remember, she said. There were too many people that day. Does it feel strange to be back? I surveyed the room. Water damage marked one wall. Two panels in the stained glass windows were cracked. The wooden pews needed refinishing. The first thing that came to mind was the restoration schedule. Not as strange as I expected. Outside, my father was arguing with the construction team about the budget. Over the past 2 years, he had learned to stop deciding whom I should date. I had learned to stop using defiance as proof that I could make my own choices. Daniel occasionally asked me to dinner. Sometimes we visited an exhibition. Sometimes we only met for coffee after work. Neither of us rushed to define what it meant. After the project meeting, Daniel removed a trust notice from his folder. Since the wedding, the engagement ring had been held in attorney escrow. Nathan had now waived any right to demand its return. "You can decide what happens to it," Daniel said. When the ring was delivered to the office, I opened the box and looked at it. 2 years earlier, I might have thrown it into the ocean, or sold it and forced the past into a meaningful ending. Now it was simply a ring. Leave it in escrow for the time being. I closed the box. There's no need to decide today. Some things didn't have to be destroyed to prove they no longer had power. My mother and I walked out of the chapel. The wind carried the salt of the ocean up from the cliffs. I remembered Nathan opening those doors on our wedding day and walking into the sunlight. At the time, I thought that moment had ended 10 years of my life. Later, I understood that ending a relationship wasn't the same as canceling a wedding. It wasn't watching someone lose his company or his position. The real ending came when I could remember him without needing to prove that anyone had lost. It had never been a contest. I no longer measure my worth by Nathan's choices or Chloe's. A car waited outside the estate. My mother got in first. I looked back at the chapel once, then walked down the steps. The door closed behind me. The estate grew smaller in the rear-view mirror. This time, I didn't look back.